The reason why you go along with the chorus, so glad you're here.
runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me.
Anybody else? Can you think of some time that somebody's put themselves in your shoes? For me, the thing that stands out in my life is that Jesus Christ put himself in my shoes. He saw my sinful condition. He understood the judgment that God the Father was going to deal out on me. And he made it possible for me to be forgiven. When he took my place on the cross and suffered the punishment that I deserved, paid the price that I should pay, he was standing in my shoes. He showed me compassion that is not even measurable. Do you deserve compassion? This is a little bit different question than do you need compassion? Do you deserve it? What do you think? Does anyone deserve compassion? We want it, right? We need it. But it's really not something that's deserved. So I want us to look at Genesis chapter 37. This is the story of Joseph. This is the beginning of the story. And hopefully you've read this part and maybe you're somewhere in the middle of Joseph's story if you're following along exactly where we're supposed to be. But tonight we're going to talk about the beginning of his story, and then hopefully you'll be motivated, if you haven't read the middle and the end of his story, that you'll do that as well. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. So Joseph was out tending the flocks with some of his brothers, and he came back to his dad and gave a bad report about what was going on in the field. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. So is it good for parents to play favorites with their kids? Definitely not. Definitely not. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So do we get jealous when somebody is treated better than we think they should be? Or when somebody is treated better than we are? Is that good? No, it's not good to be jealous either. Verse 5, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more, as if they could hate him any more than they already did. Verse 6, he said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. So he's saying I had a dream and we were all binding grain up in these bunches. And he says, mine stood up and all of yours bowed down to mine. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him. But his father kept the matter in mind. So I guess even dad had a hard time listening to his son say that mom and dad and all the brothers are going to bow down to him. And I guess I can understand that, but even though dad loved him, he's having a hard time thinking about Joseph being in charge. Verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their flocks, their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. And very well, he replied. So Dad is about to send Joseph to go check on his brothers, and they're living in the Hebron Valley, and he's going to send Joseph to Shechem to check on his brothers, and that's between 20 miles, depending on exactly where he starts and where he ends his trip. His brothers. Verse 14. So he said to him, "Go and see if it is all well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. And then Joseph arrived at Shechem. He found a man there, found him wandering in the fields, and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" His brothers, and found them near Dothan. That's another 16 miles or more away. So I guess Joseph's dad trusted Joseph, gave them the responsibility of going to check on his brothers and check on how the family business of taking care of the animals is. I guess he felt like Joseph was responsible enough to travel that far, find something out, and then make it all the way back. That when he's wandering around, somebody asked him, "What are you looking for?" And when he said he's looking for his brothers, he said, "Oh yeah, we know who you're talking about, and we know where they went." Verse 18. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. So maybe they were looking. Maybe they were always looking over their shoulder, wondering if Joseph or somebody... When does somebody look over their shoulder to see if somebody is watching? When they're doing something bad? When they don't want to get caught, when they're up to no good? When there's something happening that ought to not be happening? And what did these people, what did his brothers say? What did we just read? It says they were plotting to kill him before he even got there. What sort of hatred is that? Pretty deep. Premeditated murder. Let's get rid of our brother. Verse 19. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. So it seems as if they're going to do what they can to prevent the dreams that he had from coming true. It seems like they're going to do whatever they can to make sure he doesn't rule over them. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. So do you think Reuben's going to step in and do the right thing? Maybe. Verse 22. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So Reuben has a relative amount of compassion, a little bit of compassion. I don't know if he's just afraid he's going to get caught, afraid to get in trouble. But what should Reuben have said to his brothers who were plotting to kill Joseph? Should he have said, let's don't kill him, let's just throw him in the hole? Maybe he'll just die in the hole slowly? Or should he have said, let's don't kill him at all? Guys, why are we plotting to kill our own brother? That would have been real compassion, right? Real compassion would not be just to, let's just not do this really bad thing. Instead, let's just do something that's sort of bad. Real compassion would say, guys, we can't be thinking this way. Why would we want to kill our own brother? Yes, maybe he's a nuisance at times. Yes, he gives a bad report to Dad, but maybe he gives a bad report to Dad because we've been bad. Because we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing.
They must have had some kind of a belief that his dreams were going to come true at some point if they wanted to.
Yeah. Maybe that's part of it too, that we're going to do whatever we can to make sure he is not going to be ruling over us. But even that wouldn't necessarily be bad if Joseph would have been a good ruler. Or maybe Reuben's just trying to buy some time to think. Because we'll just put him in a hole and I'm going to figure out a way later to somehow make this situation go away. Verse 23 says, so when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. So it's like a dry well. So they treated him better than they had originally wanted to. They threw him in a hole in the ground, and they haven't killed him. So how compassionate do you think they're being? Maybe slightly compassionate? Like the question I asked a while ago, can you be slightly compassionate? So are they being compassionate?
They're being tolerant.
Tolerant, maybe? Or maybe they're like delaying the inevitable. We're going to get rid of them, but we just haven't figured out exactly how to do it yet. Maybe one or two of the brothers are right. Maybe we shouldn't kill him outright. We'll throw him in a well that he can't climb out of, and we'll just leave. I'm not sure what they're going to do. It says in verse 25, they sat down to eat their meal. And as I read this story over and over, I wonder what Joseph down in the hole in the ground is thinking. He's down there, and if you were Joseph, would you be yelling at your brothers? Like, get me out of here. Guys, how can you be sitting up there eating your lunch, talking about ending my life, telling Dad that I've been eaten by wild animals, and you're up there eating lunches? Aren't y'all going to get me out of here? And he can hear them talking about what their plans are. They look up and they see a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. They were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Page 4. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? So maybe he's being a little bit compassionate here. Maybe Judah's stepping up. I don't know if he's just worried about getting caught or maybe he sees an opportunity for gain. He sees these people coming by, maybe we can sell them. He says, verse 27, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And so his brothers agreed. So he convinces his brothers to not kill Joseph. And he uses the excuse, well, after all, he's our brother. Let's don't kill him. Let's be nicer to him. Let's just sell him. Is that compassion? No? Maybe? A little bit of compassion? I don't think it's very compassionate at all. It just makes the getting rid of Joseph thing a little cleaner, a little neater, and it puts a little change in their pocket at the same time. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. So they pull him out of the hole in the ground, they stripped him of his robe, and they look him in the eye. They probably don't even say goodbye to him. They sell him for 20 pieces of silver, which is a very small amount of money. And he's taken away to Egypt. When Reuben returned, Joseph was not there. He tore his clothes. I guess he wasn't in on the negotiation and the sale. He was just hoping that he could come back and pull him out of the hole in the ground and maybe take him back to Dad or tell him to run away or something. So he went back to his brothers and said, the boy isn't here. Where can I turn now? I can just imagine him also saying, what did you guys do? Did y'all really kill him? Where is he? How could you do that? Verse 31 says, and then they got Joseph's robe. They slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. So who's in on this lie right here? All of them. Who could have stepped in and stopped it? Any of them, right? They took the ornate robe back to their father, and they said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." So they don't even say, "Can you check this out and see if it's our brother's robe?" They said, "Examine this and see if it's your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It's my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces."
I found this on the web for some ferocious animal has devoured him. Check it out.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son for many days. So what do the brothers think? Are they that cold-hearted that they make up this story and they tell Dad that some ferocious animal has devoured his son? And they know that Dad is old. They know that Dad is going to be brokenhearted. This is possibly going to kill him. And they're okay with that? They have that much hatred for Joseph? Maybe they even resent their dad for having made Joseph a favorite. Verse 35 says, "All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." And so his father wept for him. Must have had. Do we harbor or hold on to things that are bad for our relationship with people in our family? Do we withhold apologies or other things that could make things right with somebody? Maybe because we're afraid of looking weak, afraid of what it may cost us. We may have to submit to somebody else's wishes. We may have to admit that we're wrong. But I think that probably a lot of us have somebody that we used to be really close to, maybe somebody that we should be closer to, and we're not being as compassionate as we could be. We could say or do something to make things right, but maybe we don't think that they deserve it. Maybe we think, you know what, they did something to me, or they did something to somebody I care about, and I'm just not going to forgive them. Holding on to something like that is not good. You know, we can read in this story how somebody is not being compassionate, and we can kind of easily point the finger and go, wow, how could they be so inconsiderate? I think sometimes we do the same things. And if we were to understand how compassionate God has been towards us, that Jesus was willing to be so compassionate that he would step in and take our place on the cross, endure the punishment and the shame that we deserve. And he asks us, he tells us that we need to forgive others. We need to be willing to treat people way better than we think they deserve, because we've been treated better than we deserve. And then verse 36 is, meanwhile, the Midianites, the people who had bought Joseph, they take him to Egypt and they sell him. Sell him to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So there's Joseph. He's been sold twice. He's at the mercy of other people, at the mercy of his brothers, at the mercy of the people who bought him, and at the mercy of the people who sold him to somebody else. And you'll see that over the next 20 plus years of his life, all kinds of things happen to Joseph. Probably none of the things that he wants to happen. And I don't know if during those next 20-something years, he's harboring any grudge against his brothers, or if he's angry at God, or he's wishing that things were different. I don't think that he had any of those thoughts, because if you continue to read his story, you'll see what opportunity he has to get revenge on his brothers. You see what opportunity he has to take advantage of a position that he gets into where he is in charge. He is a ruler. And they do come and they bow down to him because they don't recognize who he is. And he has the position and the power to have them executed if he wants. He's in the position of power to either help them or not help them. And these guys who showed zero compassion to him and who hated him are in a position where they need compassion. They want compassion. But if we were in that situation, would we have given them compassion? So as you read this story, as you hopefully read through the rest of Genesis, I want you guys to think, in God's Word, there's a lot of drama. There's some narratives, there's some stories that some of them are like soap operas, or some of them are like mysteries, some of them are action type stories. There's a lot of things in here. This book is about real people like you, people like me, who have experienced some very difficult things. But throughout this book, you'll see where God is compassionate. You'll see where people are maybe not as compassionate. You see that people get themselves into difficult situations because of the circumstances of that. And sometimes you'll see maybe a glimpse of yourself in some of these stories, and that our tendency is to look at the hero in the story and say, you know what, I think I'm kind of like that. I think I've been mistreated. I think that my life should turn out better, and if I read this book, maybe my life will turn out better. We're not the hero in the story, probably most of the time. A lot of times in the stories, we're the bad guy. We're the one who is stubborn or who doesn't listen. But we're the one who has recognized compassion and forgiveness, but then in turn doesn't give it to someone else. A lot of times we're the one who is lacking in love, even though we've been loved greatly. A lot of times we're the one who needs to be forgiven or forgiving someone else, and we're the one that's cold-hearted. But like I said in the beginning, someone came and stood in my place. They stood in my shoes. They understood me greatly. And in spite of who I am, in spite of my sinful nature, in spite of the fact that I wasn't even looking for God, God came looking for me. And Jesus was willing to take my place and endure the punishment and the torture and the separation from God the Father that I deserve. He showed me compassion when I didn't deserve it. So I plead with you guys to read this book. By the end of Tuesday, we'll be starting in Exodus. And Exodus, again, just like Genesis, is a very easy to read book. There will be a few places throughout the Bible where the reading might be a little bit slower. It's not as exciting. It's a lot of numbers or names or maybe some list of rules and regulations. But God's Word is critical. It's like a mirror to show us who we are. It's instruction to show us who God is. And it's about our real life. About how we can get to know who Jesus Christ is. Just like in the little video that we saw in the beginning. Things are going to happen in our life that's going to expose our heart. And expose to us and to the world around us who we really are. And we need God's Word. Desperately need God's Word. I'm so encouraged that so many of you guys are reading it. Tammy and I have had so many phone calls and messages with questions about different things that you guys have been reading just in the first half of Genesis. I'm so encouraged that people are reading it way more than they were even last year. Because last year people were reading it and telling us that they were reading it, but they weren't asking us very many questions. This year there's a lot of people asking questions, and it's very encouraging. So let me pray for you guys, and the band will come up here and play a little song to close us out. If you have anything you'd like to come up and pray about, feel free to do that at the end of the service. God, we thank you for your word. God, I thank you that your word is filled with people and their stories. Some of those people are just like us. Maybe they're living in a little bit different time and their situation was different. But God, there were people who they had relationships with you. Some people didn't have any idea who you were. They experienced good things in their life, difficult things. Some of them were so mistreated that it was hard for them to love or forgive or show compassion. And God, sometimes that's us. Sometimes we're the one who is unwilling to be compassionate. Or sometimes we're the one who is desperately needing some sort of forgiveness or compassion. God, help us to see in your word how much you love us. Help us to turn away from our sin and be willing to accept the forgiveness that you offer us. And God, help us to continue to read your word and to allow you to transform us and to renew our mind so that we can enjoy life the way you designed it, in a close relationship with you. In Jesus' name.
Lord, have your way.